The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show.
Today is Thursday, June 17th, 2021. Thanks so much for joining us. We are keeping our eye on all of the different patterns that we see across this country, state to state, city to city, whether you're from the Southeast or the Northwest. We have seen how systems have been affecting the lives of Black people and poor people across this country. We have so much to discuss this morning in terms of how not only systems are hurting us, but also how our leaders are refusing to actually take the steps necessary to do what is necessary to help us push this country forward. So many things that we're going to cover this morning. But first, we begin our morning, as always, with On the Clock with Georgia Ford.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. We have some news that feels like a bit of a step forward. The House has approved a Senate-passed bill making Juneteenth a federal holiday. Now, this is going to commemorate June 19th, the day when slaves in southern states learned that they were actually free. It feels like something that is long overdue, something that should have happened a long time ago. I mean, we have been celebrating Independence Day since, I believe, 1870 is when Congress passed that as a federal holiday. So it feels like this is something that should have happened a long time ago. I want you guys to take a listen to Representative Carolyn Maloney, who spoke about the importance of this bill on the House floor. Take a listen.
First known as Jubilee Day, Juneteenth is marked by food, music, fellowship. These celebrations honor freedom, recognize life, and uplift the complex history and the beautiful culture of the African American community. 47 states and the District of Columbia have made Juneteenth a public holiday, including my own state of New York. While millions of Americans have celebrated this important day for generations, the federal government has failed in its responsibility to recognize its significance. Today, we can change that. It is often said that those who do not remember their past are doomed to repeat it. If we want to confront the sins of slavery and move forward towards a more equitable, fair, and free society, it is incumbent upon us to recognize not only our past evils, but the moments of triumph over those evils. Making Juneteenth a federal holiday is a crucial step in remembering our past, and it will undoubtedly help us build a better future.
Now, there is one more step. So it's been passed, but the president does have to sign the bill, making it a law. So at that point, I want to bring in our guest, Sam Simmons. He is a radio talk show host. Sam, do you think President Joe Biden is going to sign this bill?
Oh, I believe so. At this point, he better, but I believe he will.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Well, you know how I am. But the thing is it interesting how far our country will go to hide our history, our full history, right? And the thing is we know how perpetrators who do wrongs to folks are always ready to talk about what they didn't do or what didn't happen. But we're finding out more and more for folks who didn't know how many things they have hid from us. Several weeks ago, we were having a lot of conversations about Tulsa and Black, our Black Wall Street. and we know that there's like 28 other uh, massacres that we know of, and there were more than 28, but 28 notable ones around the country. And so, having, and then Juneteenth, there was some more information around Juneteenth after George Floyd's killing here in Minneapolis. All of a sudden we want to know stuff about us, and but that's still at the same time we got states fighting. Um, um, Having our history in schools as this like like it's gonna uh you know turn all the little kids into, we don't want them to feel bad, that privilege of comfort. We've been uncomfortable in, especially if we, since we've been here, especially if you got slavery in your background. You've been uncomfortable from the day you walked off that ship, and in spite of that uncomfort, we still here, and we're still trying to make changes, and changes that probably should have been, like you were saying with Juneteenth, as the representative was talking about, what took it so long, right? And like I mentioned about the many different massacres in the United cities, what a lot of people don't know is several of the massacres happened 1 year after World War One, after Black men who fought in this war came back and said, "You are no longer going to treat me less than a man," and had the audacity to stand up for themselves. Because even with Tulsa, we're talking about veterans who were standing up for themselves, and they wanted to blame the massacre on them. So how you get me started. I can go on for a minute, but it's just it's the ironic part that we have to lose our lives for our country to pay attention, right? Because it's like when George Floyd happened here in Minneapolis, of that murder. I'm an old man, as you can see. I used to have black hair before COVID, and I went in the basement. So but the thing is that when that happened, I suffered, with many people of color suffered what we call that, that racial trauma, that trauma that
Yeah.
is experience that we share with somebody of our race, or somebody of your race or your culture is killed, and you feel that. We feel that. It's like the young lady that witnessed it talking about, when she's seen that, Donella,
Yeah.
she's seen her father, her uncle, and that kind of thing. So, but for me, is being older Black man, I started thinking. So all of those insults I received over these years, where police have, stopped me, and I asked them, "Why are you stopping me?" and they came up with some bogus reason, or insulted me in front of my grandkids, and then gonna have the audacity to tell me to have a nice day. Do you think, when we add up those scars, right? We add up those scars. You know, I might not show them on my face, but there's many. You got the scars coming from all different directions, and I'm considered an upstanding citizen, right? And that's the thing about the Black community. Even when we do the right thing, it's not enough. And
Well,
and so
and to your point about adding up those scars, it seems like the acknowledgement of a federal holiday is just the bare minimum. I want to bring in Ben on this, because Ben, I know you really follow closely the political side, but not everybody was in support of passing this bill.
Yeah, Ron Johnson found himself on the wrong side of history yet again, and this is something the Republicans have a really good knack for, standing against the simplest of things. This is. I mean, it's great that we have the holiday, and later on I'll be bringing on Carl Mack, who'll be discussing some more historical context for the holiday. But I'm going to be honest with you, does anybody? I don't really feel like it's much more than them painting Black Lives Matter on the street.
Right.
It doesn't really give us any tangible results. It doesn't change anything for us on our behalf. And when you speak of that, Brother Sam, what I call the catalog of traumas,
Right.
We've got a catalog of traumas in this country as Black people, and a holiday is just the beginning of what we need for recompense.
Well, it's that low hanging fruit to say they did something,
Mm.
right? It's like, Juneteenth, we celebrating it anyway, right? So we didn't need no permission, right? And and I know there's Black folks who will celebrate it and will have nothing to do with 4th of July, and so it's that low hanging fruit that we can say we do stuff, and I know sometimes I get in trouble talking bad about the liberals, but we got a whole state full of folks who said they were liberal and was woke way before George Floyd. And it happened in Minnesota. Yeah, it happened. Been happening in Minnesota for a long time. Y'all need to stay in your place. They just happen to do it what we call Minnesota nice way. And it's never been the Minnesota nice. And then the whole thing, and we know they have rules they don't tell us about, but that's been across the board. But like you said, folks. And some of the folks who really are showing their colors even more now, because they feel emboldened even more so now after the former individual who was in the White House. I'm not going to get into the name and stuff. Made it okay to be your true racist self, right? And so now so we got to fight that battle, and we got to fight the battle of folks who want to get credit for low hanging fruit. Oh, we supposed to give you a hand when that this is something we already celebrate, and now so now the federal government workers all get a day off and do whatever. Okay, so what are you going to do on that day? What are you going to do for the people? Well, that's what we're going to do, but I'm talking about in a bigger sense, right? Those folks who want to get credit. I'm talking about the bigger sense.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I see, because I want to see. I like to see action. I'm old. See, I know this stuff ain't going to change, but my grandkids, they're like chips off the old block, and they ain't trying to hear it.
That's it.
Okay, so.
That's Georgia. That's one thing I'm noticing, and Sam, I'm noticing that in across the country in general. The younger generations, they're not playing. They're not waiting. They've learned better, and so they expect better, and they're not looking for the same symbolism. They're not looking for just the first Black X or the first Black Y, the first Black chief of staff of whatever. They're not looking for those things. They're looking for actual material, tangible results that are going to affect their lives and improve their lives. And while we'll be happy to take another day off because you guys have been working us to the bone, even during COVID-19, it was more important for you to send us out there to work and make your money than to protect our lives. So we'll be more than happy to take a holiday, but there are just so many
But we
things
need more than
need.
that.
Absolutely.
Yes. Absolutely.
And the young people don't have no problem telling us, and us old people need to get out the way, or get run over. But that's being mean. But sometimes we it's difficult. It's difficult sometimes for us old folks to see what's happening.
Well, and I believe our other guest is here, Katonga Wright. She's a civil rights attorney headquartered in Columbus, Georgia. Good morning, Katonga. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
I realize that you are still working on a case that we talked about, I think, maybe 5 years ago, the case of David Pollard, who was a beloved baseball coach in Columbus, Georgia, and you're still fighting for justice for him. Can you give us an update on where things are at with that case? And for those of you who are not familiar, Coach Pollard was out and about driving to get chalk for upcoming baseball game that evening when he was killed by a vehicle that police were pursuing. He was killed during a high-speed chase. Officers were trying to apprehend a suspect who had stolen a vehicle, and during that high-speed chase, they ended up hitting his vehicle and killing him, an innocent bystander. And you have been trying to hold the city accountable, but that is clearly taking a very long time.
It is, and justice is often very slow, as we know in many, many instances, and this is another example of that. We spent quite a bit of time litigating this case in federal court, and in Georgia, you have the ability to dismiss a case and refile it. And after gathering a lot of evidence and facts, that's a decision that we chose, and refile the case in state court, which is a much more favorable jurisdiction under these circumstances. But the case has definitely taken several twists and turns, even in this late hour. Depositions of officers have revealed that there was a supervisor that called off the chase. And after that supervisor announced that the chase should be terminated due to the conditions, it was clear that supervisor was concerned about something happening, and it actually ended up being just that. And so we are looking for justice for his daughter and his wife. It's a real tragic thing that officers in our state and throughout the country, I think, really end up on an ego trip almost in these types of circumstances. While it is important to maintain order and law in our country, I just feel it can't be done at the cost of innocent lives and people like Mr. Pollard. He was just going about his day, had nothing to do with this. It's even questionable whether or not the officers, in fact, knew at the time they began the chase, whether or not this guy even had permission to drive. They never contacted the owner. They never ran plates to figure out or determine ownership before initiating this chase. But even after the chase was terminated, there was one officer that continued to pursue the vehicle moments before the accident. And that's why we're here, to seek justice for this family, and hopefully send a message that police chases are just not safe for the community.
It feels very reckless because you, in pursuit of a stolen vehicle, which, I mean, if it's a used car, you're talking about the value of maybe $1,000, $2,000, at the most $3,000 on a used vehicle that's been stolen. So here you are pursuing the $3,000 piece of property, trying to recover it, trying to apprehend someone on, a mid-level offense, and then what you're putting at risk is the safety of the general public, because they could have crashed in. That could have been anybody that they crashed into. And it just so happened that, yes, it was a beloved baseball coach who was pouring his whole life work was investing in youth. And so it's very frustrating to see the lack of accountability, that they're even pushing back this much, because I think that it's something that they could have just agreed to take responsibility for right after it happened.
It was definitely a cover-up situation, like many, many cases involving police and litigation and liability. There was a lot of information that was not shared to the public, that only through discovery and this litigation process that we were able to uncover. It's just a really unfortunate thing that time and time again we have instances of police misconduct, and we just can't allow that to go unchecked.
Well, and it brings me to some things that are happening in Minneapolis again. The National Guard has been activated again. I believe this is the third or fourth time in the last year. And it's so commonplace now that it's not even making national news. And the reason why the mayor made a request to the governor to activate the National Guard is because there has been daily protesting surrounding Winston Smith being killed by a federal task force. And then during one of those protests, a vehicle drove into the protest, hit a parked car, which then propelled forward and killed a protester. And so this has just been bubbling and bubbling over the last few weeks. And it's started to get to a point where the city feels like it's getting out of control. And so the mayor has asked for the National Guard to be activated. Sam, you're here in the cities. What has it been like for you seeing the I guess you could say, juxtaposition of how people responded to George Floyd globally. And now looking at Winston Smith, who, by the way, despite what the initial report said, he was not a murder suspect. And then according to the only witness, he did not have a gun.
Right. Well, every time one of these situations happen, especially with it in terms of this case, is the more we learn about what police systems don't do, what they're not required to do. They're not transparent. Finding out that in these kind of cases, cameras are not used or involved for only certain groups of police officers. Like you said, he wasn't a murderer. He wasn't, and so why are we taking so many resources to go after this individual? And like you said, the young lady that was in the vehicle with him said she did not see a gun. So we're back at almost the way it's always kind of been, our word against theirs, and we know how that usually goes. But being here in Minneapolis, it's been surreal for me because I live not too far from the 3rd precinct. When we talked about is that some people want to talk about the uprising, or some people want to call it riots, but the 3rd precinct is the original precinct that was set on fire, and so it's a little interesting when you're in the middle of that, right? You understand it, and you've seen the wrong, and you could feel the pain, and actually feel the anger, especially when you look at that and see this person killed in cold blood, but at the same time still feeling the repercussions, because in the neighborhood you live in, we're just coming back online with drugstores and the things that you miss, my post office, the cleaners, and so there ends up being sometimes on some days some mixed emotions. And again, we all were a little bit too comfortable here in Minneapolis, thinking that it wouldn't happen. But if you lived here, you wasn't surprised when it did.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Go
ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, because I just see the connection between how, and I think, Sam, you were alluding to this earlier, the lack of emphasis that's put on the value of Black life versus the overemphasis of how they put value on property.
Right.
And the amount of time, Katonga, as you're telling us the story out of Columbus, Georgia, the amount of time it takes to get justice for Black life, when we see they will send out the National Guard to protect their property that same day. Could you speak to that, Katonga?
Oh, is she frozen?
I believe she may be frozen there. Okay, well, I mean, the same question to you, Sam, because you can see the difference. Like, they respond on behalf of their property years before they would ever even consider responding on behalf of Black lives.
Right, and that's been the history, and so the question comes down to, how do we? I don't know. How do we do how do we be in a position to do things differently in terms of we have to go to such an extent to get somebody to listen to us about our lives, right? Because in the background, we still end up hurting on the backside, in these situations. So it is interesting, and it's like Stevie Wonder can see it,
Yeah.
And Katonga, I see that you're back with us. Ben had posed a question about seeing how long it takes to get justice when we lose a Black life versus, they're almost immediately activating the National Guard to protect their property.
Absolutely. It's really a sad thing that what the law requires is that we put a monetary value on a life. But as we look at verdicts, even when they are brought to trial, brought to a verdict, oftentimes those verdicts for Black lives are significantly less than a white counterpart under the same circumstances and situations. And that's, what do you do as far as helping a jury understand that Black lives do matter, even in the courtroom?
Absolutely. I was curious to know from you too, the case with Winston Smith, he is a little bit different than other police killings because he was actually killed by a deputy who was serving on a federal task force. And so there was no body camera footage because federal task force are not required. In fact, I think they're encouraged to not have body cameras to protect their identity. Do you know, what is the difference between having a Black person or anyone for that matter killed by a local police department versus a federal task force? Because it seems like in this instance, there has been like little response even from that task force in regards to this incident. There hasn't been a statement that's been made. There hasn't been, really any accountability for what happened.
Body cameras are so valuable, not only for the citizens who are wanting answers, but also for the officers involved to protect themselves from situations and helping after the fact understand what happened. And oftentimes those videos help to justify officers' actions. So it's really unfortunate that the federal government has chosen to take a stance to not require body cameras for all officers, even federal officers. But then again, there are many states that still don't require body cameras, Georgia being one of them. It's an elective choice that a department can choose to employ body cameras, but we all know that when there is absent body camera footage and it's the officer's word against a private citizen, the officer's gonna win 9 times out of 10, if not 100% of the time. So that's why body cameras are so important. And it's not surprising that absent body cameras, they feel they don't have to make a statement.
Well, I want to thank both of you for being here this morning. There's so much more I wanted to explore with both of you all, but we are on the clock. So thank you so much for being here. And for those of you who are watching at home, I hope you stick around for more on The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Something to buy, da ba da bun, yeah. Da ba da bum ba buy, da bum buy, da bum buy, yeah. Set the potato, da buy, da. Boy, yeah, boy, yeah. Sunlight that always stays. Dinner by the waterway. It's that sweet life. Raise your cross. Made some dude crack a smile. He asked if I could stay a while. I'm living that high life. Time to catch a flight, but you can make me go. Unlocking all the memories of my new home. Ventilated echoes playing to and fro, back and forth, yeah. Caught some kids dancing in the alleyway. Crazy how the melodies began to play, yeah. Tell me how you feeling when you hear the lyric, yeah. My heart's in Stockholm. Now I never wanna go home. I left my heart in Stockholm. Now I never wanna go home. said I already told ya, yeah. I never dated a black guy. I said you're brown yourself. Let me offer help. Come on inside, where everybody knows your name, everybody knows your name. Time to catch a flight, but you can make me go. Unlocking all the memories of my new home. Ventilated echoes playing to and fro, back and forth, yeah. Caught some kids dancing in the alleyway. Crazy how the melodies began to play, yeah. Tell me how you feeling when you hear the lyric, yeah. My heart's in Stockholm. Now I never wanna go home. I left my heart in Stockholm. Now I never wanna go home. Separate again. Sunlight that always stays in and by the waterway. It's that sweet life, sweet life, sweet life. I never wanna go home, go home. I'm living in Stockholm, Stockholm. I never wanna go home, go home. Living in Stockholm, Stockholm. I never wanna go home, go home. I'm living in Stockholm, Stockholm. Yeah. Shut up, I got the bed, the body. Never get good, never get good,
Like It or Not with Benjamin Dixon starts now.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to another episode of Like It or Not, where we're free to tell the truth and not care who doesn't like it. I am riding solo today, and I'll have my DJ exclusive, James Bubba Williams, or my co-host, Rebecca Azor, or actually she's the host of the show, so I'm just filling in on behalf of Rebecca Azor. But good morning to everyone in your the different chat rooms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, everywhere you're watching. If you're listening to us via podcast, be sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe button all across all the platforms. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be joined later on today. We have a couple of guests coming through. We have Walker Bragman of the Daily Poster. He's going to come through. We're going to talk about some environmental justice, as well as actual policies that we need to get tangible material results on behalf of the people. We'll also be speaking with Brother Carl Mack. He is a former president of the Seattle County NAACP, but more importantly, this brother has a wealth of knowledge. I met him for the first time on Tuesday night and had a chance to speak with him while we were on Roland Martin, or we had a chance to connect with each other from Roland Martin. And we were talking about the history of Juneteenth. So we're going to set the record straight in terms of the history, but also in terms of what should be happening in this country for Black people and poor marginalized communities all across the country. I first want to start with a couple of headlines to make sure that everyone is up to date with what's happening across the, quite frankly, across the world. A couple of brief headlines. The Senate passed yesterday, and we spoke about this. The Senate passed a bill to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. We'll be discussing the implications and the ramifications, if any, of giving Black people a holiday versus giving us, let's say, reparations. Reality Winner. She is the former military officer who was arrested and charged and found guilty in espionage, but she was actually reporting critical information that, quite honestly, Reality Winner should not have been in jail in the first place, because she was a whistleblower. But however, our Reality Winner was released from prison for good behavior. This is major breaking news. If you have been following along her story for the last few years, you do understand the injustice of her spending time in jail in the first place, as compared to now she has been released for good behavior. Julian Assange's father and half brother have been touring the United States to bring attention to the status of Julian Assange's fight for First Amendment rights. We also have the Belarus parades. Belarus officials are paraded the detained journalist, Roman Protasevich. They paraded him around in front of the media in a way that really signifies what we should expect going forward in that situation on the global stage. We covered that story a few weeks ago, and how that flight was intercepted by Belarusian officials, and how he was detained. And he was detained for the purposes, his actual charge that he was detained for is for organizing protests. And while we here in the United States are dealing with the other side of the equation, where the system is totally capable of absorbing all of our protests, no matter how much protest we make, there are still places on the face of this planet that do not have those same liberties. Kamala Harris becomes the first sitting vice president to march in the Pride event. This is a little bit of old news. We've been wanting to cover this for some time on this show, not because of the reasons that most people probably cover that. But it is good news to see that the United States as a whole has become more accepting of things that fall outside of the standard accepted principles in this country. Those things that fall underneath the purview of white Christian men, which have been ingrained in this country since the founding of this country. But I digress. There's a lot of things that are happening. I want to begin this morning, and I do believe that our first guest is here, so we can, David, if you want, we can jump right into the conversation with Dr. Carl Mack. He has, I consider him to be a historian. Had a chance to speak with you. Dr. Mack, first of all, thank you so much for joining me. How are you this morning?
Oh, Brother Dixon, I'm blessed. Thank you so much, man. Good to see you again.
It is a pleasure. We had a chance to talk extensively yesterday, and this falls right in line with the conversation I was just having with Georgia Ford about Juneteenth, and the fact that it's now on its way to becoming a holiday here in the United States if Joe Biden signs it into law. Let's talk about what we talked about and what you shared with the world on Roland Martin on Tuesday night, the historical inaccuracies of the date and the nature around the celebration of June 17th. Not so much as it pertains, June 19th, not so much as it pertains to the spirit of Juneteenth, but as it pertains to the actual historical record.
Yeah. And you know, I want your audience to understand this. And I you know, because when I say to people that I have an issue with Juneteenth, they get all in their feelings about it. Like, oh no, here comes another one trying to rain on our parade. No. See, when white folks tell our history wrong, we get all in our feelings about it, and rightfully so. But now, as the messenger to tell you what's going on and why it's wrong. So I absolutely have no problem with Juneteenth. But I'm going to absolutely tell you what I do have a problem with. I do have a problem with the same thing that we have a problem with when white folks tell our history wrong, is that it's wrong. And it being wrong is also disrespectful. You know, just like now we want to scream that Black Lives Matter. With what's going on with Juneteenth, because of our lack of scholarship, we're saying that 225,000 Black lives don't matter. So let's get into exactly what most of us have been taught about Juneteenth. We've been taught several things. Number one, that these were the last Blacks enslaved, those in Galveston, Texas. So on June 19th, 1865, when General Gordon Granger rode into Galveston, Texas, and found Blacks still enslaved, in accordance to Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, which was first issued on September 22nd, 1862, went into effect on January 1st, 1863. So in accordance with that proclamation, General Granger now issues what we know as General Order Number 3, which we now call Juneteenth. So most of us are saying, hey, these were the last blacks enslaved. Wrong. We're also saying, well, they got the news a year and a half late. Wrong. Black folks been communicating with black folks long before the 20th century, through poems, through whatever. You don't think that when Lincoln even issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, you don't think black folks knew about it? It's not about when they knew about it. What were they going to do about it? That's why a war had to be fought. See, again,
Brother Mack, let me jump in there, because I want to make sure that that they get some of these key points that you're putting here.
Okay, so
the actual date versus, and there's two parts that I'm hearing here. The actual date is problematic with Juneteenth, but also the fact that even after the slaves in Texas were freed, there were still other black people enslaved in this country.
And that is the crux of the problem. So when we say Black Lives Matter, again, go back into the spirit of Sister Harriet Tubman. They asked the sister, well, why, if you're free, why would you go back? She says, I'm not free until all of us are free. So now here we're trying to celebrate freedom. I'm okay. I get the intent of it. But see, you can't go and celebrate July 4th on July 3rd.
Right.
You can't remember 9/11 on 9/10. But then when it comes to our history, oh, let's just give them anything. And then we as black folks act like it ought to be okay. So again, when white folks get it wrong, we all in our feelings about it. Well, in this situation, we're getting it wrong. So let me tell you what the legislation absolutely is saying. And Brother Dixon, I think I sent you the legislation from the state of Washington as an example.
Okay.
So when you look at the legislation for the state of Washington, and you scroll down, and this is House Bill 1016, and this was presented by a black representative by the name of Melanie Morgan. Now, I tried my best to reach out to Sister Morgan. No, she don't want to hear it. She don't want to hear it because what? She's embarrassed that she didn't know our history, and none of us should be embarrassed about it. We all went through pretty much the same educational system where our history was denied us. It was at one time illegal to even teach our people. So the fact that we don't know our history, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But when we, and again, there's a difference between ignorance and stupidity. Ignorance is we don't know. And all of us to some degree are ignorant. Stupid is when you know better and you still do wrong. See, that's the fundamental difference. So in the Washington Bill 1016, it says the legislature intends to designate June 19th as a state paid holiday celebrating the end of chattel slavery. In 1997, there was a senator from the state of Mississippi, Thad Cochran, who introduced a joint resolution in the Senate similar to what just passed a couple of days ago. The headlines on that says, commemorating June 19th, the day that slavery finally came to an end. Over in the House, in that same year, another Republican by the name of J.C. Watts introduced a joint resolution saying exactly the same thing, that we're going to commemorate Juneteenth, the day that slavery finally came to an end. So fam, let me just give you.
But that wasn't the day.
Absolutely, it wasn't the day. So here's the civics lesson. Okay. In order to get an amendment passed, you need two things to happen. You need 2/3 of the Congress to approve the proposal, and you need 3/4 of the states existing to ratify it. At the time that the Civil War ended, there were 36 states in the United States. 36. So, of those 36 states, so on January 31st, 1865, 2/3 of the Congress approved the proposal. So they sent it out to the 36 states. That means we needed 27 states to ratify this proposal. On December 6th, 1865, 6 months after Juneteenth, Georgia became the 27th state to ratify the 13th Amendment.
Mm.
But now we got to go back and take a look at the Emancipation Proclamation, because that's where everybody is twisted.
Well, before we go there, before we get to that, because I want to make sure these points actually stick with the audience. So the date that the Congress or the Senate has Juneteenth, June 19th, to commemorate the end of slavery. You're saying that what is the actual date? If it's not Juneteenth, what is the correct date that people should be looking at for the end of chattel slavery in this country?
December 6th.
December
6th is the day. Now, I don't want you to get twisted with me and go, oh, well, Brother Mack is just caught up on a technicality. The hell with that. I'm not fucking caught up on a technicality. What I'm talking about is Black Lives Matter. 225,000 of our people were still enslaved after June 19th. Now, if you want to tell me they don't matter, you go deal with that issue.
Right.
But as far as I'm concerned, this ain't a technicality. I'm listening to 225,000 crying souls saying, hey, what do you mean the end of slavery? What about us?
Right.
And the only reason, family, the only reason you want to forget about it and think I'm off my rocker and I'm all in my feelings is because somehow this is an inconvenience to you.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, you gotta, yeah. I mean, you gotta, and I know you understand. I'm saying this for the benefit of the audience.
Sure.
We have to, because when you came on, and we're going to take a quick break. And how much time can you spend with me? Because I have another guest I want to bring in to the conversation. We'll come back full circle because you have some calculations on reparations that I actually want to make sure that we get in here.
Right.
But because when the first time I met you, which was Tuesday night, and I heard you talking about it, my first inclination was exactly what you're saying. My first inclination was, what's this guy talking about? Like I said, I mean, we laughed about it yesterday, but I'm like, who is this old head out here? We're trying to mess up, like, because I'm looking, Juneteenth is coming up this weekend. I'm looking to have a good time. I'm looking to barbecue and hang out with my family. But then as I started to listen to you, and I started to listen to the preciseness that you were addressing the historical record, you're letting us know that regardless of what we celebrate on Juneteenth, there were still 250,000 Black people still enslaved all the way until December.
And Brother Dixon and everybody else, fire up the barbecues. Let's have a great time, because any day that Black folks were freed from the evilness of chattel slavery is a beautiful day. But do not celebrate under the guise that these were the last Black folks enslaved. There were 225,000 of our people still waiting to taste freedom. So you're absolutely correct. Now, as far as how much time I got, brother, with the love that you are now expressing and trying to educate our people, I got all day with you.
All right, I love it. All right, so we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Walker Bragman of the Daily Poster. We're going to shift the topic just a little, but you'll see that it's all connected. What are we actually tangibly going to get versus the symbolism that they're more than happy to give us? Are we going to get some tangible material benefits from this administration? Or are we going to get it from this government? More like it or not when we come back after this.
I stay and just repeat it now. Yeah, oh, we dream about all things being alright, but we freeze when it's all up to us. So let's fight it, make a stand and try it. Everything will matter from now on. Let's fight it, there's no way to hide it, 'cause everything will matter from now on, 'cause it's high tide.
now is Walker Bragman of the Daily Poster. He is a reporter, a journalist, and he's been covering politics, progressive politics, for some years now. Walker, thank you for joining us. How are you this morning?
I'm not bad, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing good. Listen, man, it's been a while since we had a chance to speak, but the times that we've covered these stories, we both cover them from the perspective of what can we actually get done for the people. And I was just been looking through your work in general, but listening to your stance on some things, and I'm curious. What let's talk about some specific tangible things that this country can do, not only for Black people, but for poor marginalized communities across this country in general. And one of the first things is we talk about the student loans, the fact that student loans could be canceled right now. We talk about HR1, the fact that voting rights need to be protected for all marginalized communities right now. But then we also see the filibuster being used by Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, and almost used as a foil, as an excuse for Democrats to say, well, we can't do anything. So they're more than happy to give us holidays. They're more than happy to give us, symbolism. But when it comes time to actually getting results, it's little to none. What are your thoughts?
Ben, I think you're absolutely right. But I do want to push back on the idea that reparations is not a tangible benefit for everybody, because if you lift up, particularly the Black community in America, that benefits everybody.
Yeah.
I
don't know. I'm not sure if I phrased it poorly like that.
No,
I totally agree.
I know that
we're waiting on our reparations. Rep one, hashtag Rep one. Go ahead, Walker. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that issue in particular gets framed as like a specific benefit for just one segment of the population. But the truth is that, first of all, not only is it a debt owed, but it would lift up everybody. One of the easiest things to do would be to pump money into the Black community. And
yeah, I mean, it's straightforward, right? It's the same thing we saw with the stimulus package with
exactly
when you put money into the hands of the people, that money stimulates the economy, but also so it doesn't only just benefit the person that received the money, it benefits the entirety of the nation. And so reparations, what you're saying is reparations absolutely is not only a benefit for Black people, but it's a benefit for this country as a whole.
Exactly. And you know what? You also mentioned student debt cancellation. That's another thing that we could do. That there was a study done that the more debt you cancel, the greater the impact on the racial wealth gap. And so student debt cancellation is another thing that you could do. A single payer healthcare system would benefit everybody. I mean, everybody. It's healthcare in America, especially now after COVID, is just, if you got to see that it's not working.
Yeah.
And I think most people understand that. I know you understand that. You've been on this for years. That's why I've been such a big fan of yours for years.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you. No, and I don't want to breeze past any of these tangible results, because these are the things that are, at least they're on the board. The possibility of student debt being canceled, that's on the board. Whether or not it'll happen, that depends on the administration. The possibility of a single payer system, it may be years away, but it's on the board. These are actually things that can bring not only the material benefit to Black people and to marginalized communities in general, but these are the things that these corporations are going to be fighting like hell to preserve, because they make so much money doing it. Like when we think about the healthcare industry, the billions of dollars that are made, the hundreds of billions of dollars that are made in profit, that they're not going to go down fighting easily. They're going to fight like hell. Tell us about what we can expect from opposition, generally speaking, when it comes time to doing something for the people, because it seems as though as soon as we try to do something for folks in this country that actually is meaningful, then we get all of the opposition. Then we get people who won't people who won't vote down the filibuster.
Well, this is the big problem in our system. I mean, there are a host of problems, but this is one that I think underlies every other issue, is that there are a lot of as long as money is allowed to just run wild, change is a long shot. And you might get half measures that don't really solve the problem, and they'll be framed as giant accomplishments. And I think we saw that with the Affordable Care Act. It was an effort to do something without attacking the underlying problem in our healthcare system, which is the for-profit motive. But yeah, I mean, every time, even on the most minimal of changes, you see major industry opposition. And unfortunately, the more money that gets spent per election cycle, the more necessary money becomes, and those donors become in the next election cycle. So it's a, I don't want to keep saying the word cycle, but it is a vicious cycle.
No, I was going to echo the same thing. It is literally a vicious cycle. One more thing, Walker, your work over at the Daily Post and some of your recent articles you've been writing about the environment, environmental justice, but also the money that's behind stopping progress on that front. We've had a couple of guests on who have talked about the importance of environmental justice, not only from the Black community's perspective, but for the broader humanity, to be quite honest with you. Talk to us about that entrenched money as it pertains to some of the environmental issues you've been covering over at the Daily Poster.
So I mean, Biden pledged that he would tackle climate change, and he got a lot of good press for his plan let's go back to the campaign trail when Biden's advisor said, well, we're looking for a middle ground, and they took a lot of flack for that. But afterward, they released this plan, and it got a lot of good press. The environmental groups were surprised, I think, because it was not a bare minimum plan. It still didn't include things like banning fracking, but it was more than I think progressives were expecting. But in this administration, which is the best on climate change in my lifetime, you still have very entrenched fossil fuel interests within the administration itself. Like climate envoy John Kerry is invested in fossil fuels. Susan Rice, also policy advisor, also invested in fossil fuels. Eric Lander, science advisor, invested in fossil fuels. And just recently, there was a story, Neil McBride, who was tapped as general counsel of the Treasury Department, sued the Treasury Department on behalf of Exxon, back in 2017. I mean, it's like we have to do something about money in politics, and we have to get it under control, because climate justice, as you said, is essential. It's essential for marginalized communities in the United States, but also globally in the global South. I mean, if climate change could make the equatorial band unlivable, which, I mean, it's unthinkable, but it could make living at the equator impossible.
Man, I'm laughing because it is, for not crying, because of the seriousness with which the seriousness that we're faced with in this country, on this planet, the issues. We're talking about life or death here.
Yeah.
And
for millions of people.
And we're literally doing we're playing this game with our lives. We're playing a game of Russian roulette with our lives over some money.
Yeah.
And that money, not only in terms of the greed of the people making the money, but also the greed of the people receiving the money in Washington, D.C. And it's because of policies like that we're absolutely unable to get the kind of progress that we need. One last thing. I know I said the last question was going to be the last question, but the more you speak, the more I want to unpack with you. I would like for you to just kind of reflect, though, on how this is not an American phenomenon. We're seeing this type of right-wing plutocracy on a global scale. We're seeing this lean towards fascism on a global scale, and we're seeing it not only infiltrate. It's at every level. It's at a national level, it's at our local level, and it's really tied into greed at the end of the day. It's tied into bigotry, it's tied into the desire for wealth, but it's something that we're facing almost like a game of chicken, we're looking at all of the intransigence, all the intransigence. We're looking at all of the greed. We're looking at all of the money in politics, but we're also looking at an impending doom when we talk about the environment, when we talk about the clash of cultures, when we talk about all the things that we're facing. We're really, they're playing games with it. And I quite honestly, it's not just America. Talk about it.
You know, that's a really, really good point. Because the longer we delay in acting, the worse, the higher the likelihood that we face catastrophic consequences. And you know, it's really disheartening, I have to say, sometimes to watch the discourse in this country, because it's very much like we get focused on like pet issues. I know. Not you, but there have been people on the left who have made politics all about one politician or another, and whether or not that politician has betrayed them, or and like, you know, these are very, very deep systemic issues that we need to attack, and we need to look at them as systemic issues and understand that it's way bigger than one politician who you know, you feel may have betrayed one one promise or another. Like these issues that we you know, people have to organize, they have to mobilize. We got to keep talking about them, because having it in the conversation, you keep those things on the table. You keep Medicare for all on the table. You keep $15 minimum wage and debt cancellation. Those have to be normalized. And if it's not happening in Washington because of the money, it has to happen at the grassroots level. And that's why shows like yours are so important. And voices like yours are so important. So I really want to thank you for having me on today.
No, it's our pleasure, and thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you everyone over at the Daily Poster. We've been speaking with some of your colleagues, and we're going to continue speaking with them because of the consistency of the work. So Walker, thank you so much.
Well, they're fantastic.
Yeah, no, they really are. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Ben.
David, take us to a quick break. When we come back, we'll be joined again by Dr. Carl. I can't say Carl. Professor Carl is one of the most difficult words for me to say. I just want to put that on the record. I don't know why, but we'll be joined by Carl Mack again. We're going to talk a little bit more about Juneteenth, as well as reparations, his case for reparations, which I think is pretty fascinating. More like it or not, right after this.
Something to buy, yeah. Set the sunlight that always stays, dinner by the waterway. It's that sweet life. Raise your cross. Made some dude crack a smile. He asked if I could stay a while. I'm living that high life. Time to catch a flight, but you can make me go. Unlocking all the memories of my new home. Ventilated echoes playing to and fro. Back and forth, yeah. Caught some kids dancing in the alleyway. Crazy how the melodies began to play, yeah. Tell me how you feeling when you hear the lyric, yeah. My heart's in Stockholm. Now I never wanna go home. I left my heart in Stockholm. Now I never wanna go home.
Welcome back to Like It or Not, where we're free to tell the truth and not care who doesn't like it. Dr. Mack, I want to bring him back onto the screen. Thanks for hanging out with us this morning. I've got a couple of clips. We're gonna circle back to the reparations conversation as well as the Juneteenth conversation. I just kind of want to get your snap reaction to a couple of clips that we have, if that's okay with you. You have some time for that?
Sure. Sure.
All right, this first clip, I want to start with, let's see, I think I want to start with the January 6th commission. It is a little long, so we'll probably stop in the middle of it, but I really want to know your opinion. We're going to watch a little bit of this clip. What happened on January 6th showed that this country, there's a large portion in this country that is willing to overthrow this country if they do not get their way at the voting booth. So they're basically saying, to hell with democracy. We want democracy only if it works for us. Before I play the clip, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, again, this is the importance, Brother Dixon, of understanding history, because what we saw on January 6th, it happened before, and it happened on a greater, larger scale. And so, we can either talk about it now, or we'll watch the clip, and then I'll tell you historically when this happened, why it happened. So January 6th was not an aberration. It has happened before. And
January 6th has happened before. I want everyone to keep that in your mind as we take a look at this clip and we come back and discuss the times that January 6th has happened before in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the clip is not ready yet. So Professor, Dr. Hart, go ahead and tell us before how this has happened in American history, but at a more even bloodier scale.
And when it happened, it specifically targeted African Americans, specifically targeted us. So it goes back to Reconstruction. The presidential election of 1876 was between two men. And keep in mind that we, as Black folks, were members of the Republican Party. We were the party of Lincoln, right? And the Democrats were the slaveholding party. So the election was between Rutherford B. Hayes and Republican Rutherford B. Hayes and Democrat Samuel Tilden. So that election, like all presidential elections, when you're grabbing for power, especially when Black folks are on the uprise, that election got contested. So right here in nation's capital in Washington, D.C., these two men in an unofficial meeting met in a hotel owned by a Black man named James Wormley in D.C., okay? And they struck a compromise, and that compromise is known as the Compromise of 1877. And so in layman's terms, what happened is this. Tilden said to Hayes, listen, my brother, I'll give you the Oval Office. You can have the White House, but I need something in return. And Hayes says, in an exchange for power, my brother, what is it you would like? Tilden said to Hayes, since the Civil War ended and now all these Black folks are freed, the only reason they're able to do what they want to do and live a somewhat of a fair life is because you got federal troops down there protecting them. No different than when you see wars break out now and we leave troops in Afghanistan or anywhere else to maintain the peace. There were federal troops in the South that was protecting us when we were building schools, when we were getting education, participating in the political process. Federal troops were in the South protecting us. So Tilden said to Hayes, I want you to remove all those federal troops. And Hayes says, so if I pull them out, you're going to give me the Oval Office. Deal. They struck the deal. When they removed those federal troops out, everything that all of you saw on video on January 6th, it played out all over the South. They literally walked in and they told the carpetbaggers, and these are white folks who came from the South to participate in the political process, you got a certain amount of time to get out of here. Some of them they gave warning to, but they literally just walked into offices all over the South and literally started killing Black representatives who were in political positions. Literally everything you saw on January 6th, it played out over the entire South because of the Compromise of 1877, where Rutherford B. Hayes agreed to pull the federal troops out of the South in order to become president.
So we see yet again, and I had not heard of that until you know, and I one thing I appreciate about you is that you're okay with the fact that we don't know that everybody doesn't know this history.
Well, Brother Dixon, let me correct you on something. I want folks to understand just a little bit about me. I am a mechanical engineer by trade. I graduated from Mississippi State with a mechanical engineering degree. I never studied Black history when I was growing up, and there were implications of that. It was only in my adulthood that I became extremely curious about who I am as a Black man, and I started studying. So I'm not a historian of academic training, but I am a student and I'm constantly trying to learn. So I absolutely understand why we don't know. And that's why I so appreciate what you're doing on your program to help us to learn about ourselves. And that's why I'm understanding about the issues behind Juneteenth. That's why I so appreciate Roland Martin. I so appreciate the Black press, because you all are our voice to help us to understand. We as a people just have to humble ourselves. And I got to say this before we go on, Brother Dixon. There were a lot of folks who contacted me after the Roland Martin show, and they praised what you did, because you did what most of us are afraid to do. You said, look, man, I had no idea what that brother just laid on us. Most of us will not admit that we don't know our history, and we'll make the mistakes. You know, it's just like in classroom when our children don't understand and they're afraid to raise their hand and say, I don't know. That's what you did. And so many people that contacted me, literally everybody who contacted me, that was one of the single points that they pointed out. It's the respect that they had for you for acknowledging that, man, I didn't know, and I'm glad that brother helped educate me a little bit. So I just want to say, on behalf of myself and all of my friends, I appreciate your humility and what you're doing to help us to learn a little bit more about who we are as a people and our experience here.
Oh, wow, brother. I appreciate that. No, there's so much that I don't know that I don't have time to pretend I don't have time to pretend like I know it, because I could just as easily just listen to somebody who does. Let's take a listen to this clip. This is a clip where they're discussing the January 6th or the January 6th Commission. And I want us to put this in context of everything that you just said about what happened historically in this country, where January 6th played itself out dozens of times over across the South during Reconstruction. Let's take a look at it, Dave.
The January 6th Commission, because this really bothers me, and it's like I said, I was horrified by January 6th. I think what happened was terrible. I still see, if you are a journalist in Washington, I see these CNN correspondents running up and chasing down senators in the hallways, being like, Senator, what about the January 6th Commission? Senator, do you support against January 6th Commission? What about subpoena power whenever it comes to the January 6th Commission? Meanwhile, and we recently covered this, there is a national reckoning around home prices in America.
Okay, but they're not mutually exclusive, right? Well, but the January 6th thing is important.
See, it is important, and but is it the 6 months later, should be the ruling number one conversation of journalists?
I think it's really important. And one of the reasons why I think it's important, because it highlights the reasons why a guy like Donald Trump is so fucking dangerous, is because a guy can incite a bunch of morons to do something really fucking stupid. And now that he's silenced off of social media, and now that, that actually did happen, once it becomes a thing, it can be like mass shootings, right? They didn't exist, then they did. Right. Now they're a thing. So that could be a thing again.
If it was a real commission, I would believe you, Joe. But knowing how these things work, I know that this commission would be some sort of bullshit, like the Benghazi report before it, or many of these others. The way that the politics works around it, it will dominate the news cycle. And here's the thing, though. Washington actually is a zero-sum game. Like, when I'm talking about mutual exclusivity, it actually is. Senate floor time is the most precious thing in D.C. So whatever the driving conversation of the D.C. is that day, it is actually detracting from somewhere else, because these people take vacations literally every other day. The August recess is coming up, all of this. So when we focus on, look, the presidency is really about 100 days. And after that, you're running for the midterms, and after that, you're running for re-election. In terms of the last, 75, 80 years of the American presidency, the vast majority of major legislation moves in the first couple of months of the administration, and that's it. You're totally dead. And so for the fact that January 6th continues to dominate American politics, I agree with you. It's completely important. And if it was a real commission, yes. But I know that there are these titanic other issues moving within American politics and that are getting zero attention. Lab leak is actually number one. Maybe somebody should go and ask a Democratic senator whether they believe in the lab leak theory or not. So this is the mutual exclusivity, is because the CNN reporter must ask this, because he needs to give his bosses something to air on the nightly news that day, which is part of the editorial agenda. Well, the Fox News reporter has to do the same thing, and it comes together to mask all of these incredibly important issues. So it really is a tragedy, because it's like you said, I don't want to downplay Jan 6. I actually think it was terrible, and it does show the power of a demagogue, of a charlatan whenever you become president. But whenever we're focusing on that at the expense of everything else, and maybe we should even ask, like, why are these people all like why are you willing to storm the Capitol for Trump?
I can help you out with that.
Yeah, please tell me. Yeah,
because they're idiots. There's a lot of idiots. It's very easy to survive.
So, Dr. Mack, I wanted to bring that clip in. That's a clip of Joe Rogan with Crystal Ball, and I forgot the other gentleman's name in the clip. But they're discussing something that is regularly discussed in media critiques, in progressive politics circles, and some right-wing libertarian circles. And it is whether or not we should get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th, as opposed to everything else. It's almost as though they're setting up a false choice here in terms of our ability to investigate what happened on January 6th versus our ability to do something good for the people. And in reality, even if we don't investigate January 6th, we're not seeing a whole lot of actual tangible results for the people. I want you to address that in context of how we messed it up in history the last time, because we didn't get the Reconstruction right. We still are dealing with some of the ramifications. Speak about that.
Okay, well, I'm laughing because I don't want to go back to Reconstruction on my answer to this. See, you, me, and everybody that's out there that watch television, we all saw it play out. So I absolutely agree with Rogan when he says, we need a commission. I agree with the other brother that says, what is it going to show us? So I compare this to March 3rd, 1991. And this is from a Black perspective, how I'm telling you what I compare it to. So what happened on March 3rd, 1991? We all sat there and we watched a videotape from a Black man on his balcony of a beating of motorist Rodney King. We watched it all play out. And we as Black folks, we sat back, we said, okay, for one of the first times in our history, we absolutely see what's going on. Okay, you want to go to trial? Fine. But what did that videotape do? It made folks say, I don't believe my lying eyes. So back to January 6th, okay, fine, we could do a commission, but all of us heard what Trump said. All of us heard what the mob, how they digested it. All of us saw what they did. And again, when you storm the United States Capitol, when you're out there talking about death to the vice president, death to these congressmen, this isn't what do you need to know here? What is it that the commission is going to say to us that we all did not see? Now, the one thing that I would say you should have a commission for is because to this day, I need to see accountability on Trump. Trump needs to be held accountable to it. Who was Trump's lawyer? And it's escaping my mind, Brother Dick.
If you hadn't asked me, I could see his
former mayor of New York.
Oh, Rudy Giuliani.
Giuliani needs to be held accountable. If there were, so now that I'm asking the questions, okay, fine, I'll go with the commission, because if indeed that there were armed security inside the Capitol who were hugging, as Trump said, and allowing these people to come in, see, they violated their oath, because when you take that oath, you say, I swear to protect against enemies, both foreign and domestic. So if there were security inside the Capitol who conspired and helped these people, all of them need to be held accountable. So from a standpoint of knowing what happened, we don't need a commission for that. But from a standpoint of holding folks accountable, and I'm talking all the way from Trump, Giuliani, all the way to any security guard that conspired with that, if there was information given saying, these are friendlies, let them go, whoever gave those orders. So as I think about it now, Brother Dixon, yeah, a commission should be done, but that commission should be held specifically so that we can hold folks accountable. And when you're talking about holding folks accountable, you're talking about treason here. We're not talking about some misdemeanor. We're talking treason.
That's it. That's the thing. Because they've shown us who was I think it might have been Roland, it might have been you. I don't know who said it the other day, but I brought up the fact that that these people are willing to overthrow the country because they lost an election. And somebody made the point that this ain't the first time. They literally started the entire Confederacy because they couldn't get their way, right? Treason. They have been committing treason throughout the history of this country because they cannot get their way. And we are seeing very specifically the clash between white supremacy in this country and their desire to control and dominate this American empire and this American system. And if they don't get their way, or even worse, if black folks actually get power, they'll burn this whole thing to the ground.
Okay, so Brother Dixon, I'm going to keep reiterating over and over again. This is why we need to know our history. And this is why they don't want you to do it with this whole critical race theory thing, right? But this is why we need to know our history, because what you just said, here's another historical example of it. Remember in 1954, right? There was something happened in 1954. There was a famous civil rights landmark case, Brown versus Board of Education.
Yeah.
Right? So what did the High Court rule? The High Court basically said that segregation in public education is unconstitutional. You got to open it up. And what did the Southern leaders in the United States Congress did? Have you ever heard of the Southern Manifesto, Brother Dixon?
Yes, yeah.
These cats wrote a manifesto that says, I don't care what you do, but do not integrate public schools in the South. And I am proof positive. My family, I got a picture of my mother, my oldest brother, my 2 aunts, and my first cousins integrating a Jackson Public School, Davis Elementary School, named after former Confederate President Jefferson Davis, 3 years after Brown versus Board of Education. So to your point, and if you study history, whenever black folks are on the rise, racism ramps up.
Yeah.
I'll give you this as an example. The Civil War ends April 9th, 1865. You know what happened in December? Now we get the 13th Amendment, right? When we get that 13th Amendment and they've lost the Civil War, 6 ex-Confederate troops met in Pulaski, Tennessee. They formed a little group called the Ku Klux Klan. Why? Because blacks were on the uprise. In 1868, when the 14th Amendment passed and we got citizenship, they began to ramp it up again. And in 1870, when black men got the right to vote, all of a sudden you start seeing all these voter restrictions, voter suppression efforts, the grandfather clause, literacy tests, black codes, all of these things. So every time when Barack Obama gets elected president, all of a sudden we get this resurgence in law enforcement where let's just shoot and kill any black person we want with immunity, qualified immunity. This happens historically whenever black folks are on the rise. And now Biden selects as his vice presidential running mate a black woman. And what do? And they lose the election. Oh my God, we're not going to do that again. Now we're going to institute voter suppression laws. And as a matter of fact, the election was unfair. Forget what the court said, forget facts and anything else. Now on January 6th, we will overthrow the country. That is a common play throughout history when black folks are on the rise trying to get to equality.
There's so much there. There's so much there. I want to play this next clip. It's a compilation of hysteria around exactly what you're talking about, critical race theory. And then I want us to discuss that African proverb that says that until the lions have historians, the history will always be told by the hunters. Let's take a look at this clip.
Right.
Communists like sameness. And that is what you're starting to see with critical race theory and other types of things like this with the school boards.
Punctuality? Racist. Ice cream trucks? Super racist. Shakespeare? White supremacy. Bird racism. We must become actively anti-bird. Us and me and my identity. Let's talk about me and you've offended me.
Cancel culture, Twitter mob.
I wonder why. It's liberal privilege.
To which I say I've never said a racist thing about Meghan Markle or anybody else.
The pervasiveness of this critical race theory issue.
Anti-American critical race theory.
And some of this racial bullying.
Is our military racist? Is our country inherently racist?
Yes, they are.
I don't know if they meant to answer the question that way at the end, but I mean, there it is. This is just maybe a 45-second clip of the hysteria that goes on all day, every day, on every single media outlet, radio station, talk radio, Fox News. All of these outlets are pushing this idea that why are they so afraid of critical race theory?
When you start talking about America's original sin, the inhumanity, again, I want to say the inhumanity of how America was built. That's a shame. That's just far too much for them to take right now, which is why they're trying to stop any kind of study on that. And I want you to understand something. People are going to say, hey, wait a minute. This whole idea of slavery, why are Black folks acting like they were the only ones enslaved? Man is enslaved, man, since man's been here. Go back almost 11,000 years. So why are we dealing with this now? Well, I can respect that point, fam. But I want to tell you something that is very unique about American slavery, unlike anything that I know. Now, there may be another example of it. I'm just telling you that I don't know it. So the uniqueness of American slavery that's different from any other form of slavery. And it's not my opinion. All you need to do is go to Article 1, Section 2, Part 3 of the Constitution, and you will see the uniqueness of American slavery different from any other form of slavery. American slavery is the first and only form of slavery that I know that took the slave out of the human equation. What do you mean, Carl? He took him out of the human equation. Article 1, Section 2, Part 3 define African American, those of us enslaved, as 3/5 of a person. And furthermore, because words matter, and I want to apologize to my ancestors for saying this, we should never say slave, because that implies that we were born a slave. We need to always say enslaved, because that reminds us that somebody put us in slavery.
Come on now.
And that's what they don't want you to understand. They don't want you to see the barbarianism of what they did, the nefarious actions of this country in enslaving our ancestors. So again, when you think about American slavery, and they have to take a critical look at it based on race, this is the abomination that they don't want you to understand. Again, here is the hypocrisy of this democracy. This democracy was based on inalienable rights. In layman terms, family, inalienable rights are God-given rights, not rights that man gives you, rights that God give you. So now this country is founded on the principles of inalienable rights, a democracy. And at the very same time that you do it, you're now going to enslave another member of the human race, which is why when you look at the Constitution, you will never see the word slave. That level of hypocrisy, they just realized was just a bit too much, even for the quote unquote founding fathers. You don't even see the word slave in there, yet they talk about us. So that level of hypocrisy, and see, the importance of history is that history helps you to think critically, which is what you and I are doing now. When we look at January 6th, it harkens us back to the Compromise of 1877. We hear about the January 6th Commission and what the fatal flaws could be. It harkens us back to March 3rd, March 3rd, 1991, when we saw the Rodney King situation. There's a videotape, and you don't believe your own lying eyes. We're not going to believe our lying eyes of what we saw and what could potentially come out of it. When we take a look at what happened with Brown versus Board of Education and the Southern Manifesto to say, forget what the highest court in the land says. See, when it plays in their favor, when you go back to the Dred Scott decision, right, of 1857, when you look at that decision, when Chief Justice Roger B. Taney said, when the Constitution was written, the black man had no rights by which the white man had to respect. Oh, they want to adhere to that. They want to adhere to that. Plessy versus Ferguson, they want to adhere to that. But when you start talking about equality, oh no, we're going to change the rules. Here's America talking about their capitalistic society and how competitive we are, and we'll compete with the best in the world. But when black folks and other minorities start voting, no, there's too many people voting, we need to change the rules. History is full of that. That is the type of critical thinking that they're most afraid. And as Malcolm said this, of all of our studies, History is best qualified to reward all research, because when you find that you have a problem, all you have to do is study the historical methods of people with problems like yours. And when you find out how they solve theirs, you'll know how to solve yours.
That's it.
They don't want you to know history.
Professor, we have I've already held you a long time, but we still have the reparations conversation a little bit more. We got to dovetail on Juneteenth. I want to take it to the after party because I want to take the filter off. Right now, we're doing the public show. The after party is where we let our hair down. I mean, you can let yours down. I can't let mine down. But we're gonna take 5. David, give us about 5 minutes of music. We're gonna take a break. Dr. Mack, go get you some coffee or something. When we come back, we're gonna come back with the after party. And in the after party, we're gonna get down to nitty gritty on reparations. We're gonna get down to nitty gritty on all this other stuff, and we're gonna take the filter off because there's no there's no censorship in the after party. Go. What's that, Professor Mack?
So Brother Dixon, before we go to the after party, for those who are tuned in, I need you to pull up 2 documents.
Yes.
I need you to pull up Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. It starts with the migration. And then I need you to pull up the Mississippi Letter of Secession. Those 2 documents are going to be germane to my argument for reparations.
Okay. And you know what? And actually, we're going to the after party, David, but keep that link live in public. So if anybody is watching it live in public, they can stay and watch it, because I want as many people as possible to hear it. We're going to clip that segment that we're going to do on reparations. We're going to share it. But I want us to have the freedom to discuss it, not on the public airwaves. So that said, we'll have more likely than not tomorrow morning, regular time. Everyone stay tuned for the after party. We'll be back with Dr. Carl Mack as we discuss reparations. And we'll see you next time. David, it's in your hands.
Come again. They do what I do. I'm like Simon Says. Yeah.
I'm the one that don't feel right. I still wanna party with her. Oh yeah. Even when it don't feel right. You know I'ma party with her, with her, with her. We been chillin' on through Wednesday, slept until it's Thursday. She don't wanna leave me, not just yet. Told me all about last Friday when she went all crazy. Didn't go to bed till Saturday. I don't wanna go without, so I asked her to stay. Though she broke my heart in a million ways, but I'm putting that aside now. I'ma feel alright now, happy just as long as she's with me. I've been trying my luck every day of the week, yeah. With my baby, what's up? Always down every weekend. No, I love her too much, but I just can't get enough. She's slipping through the cracks. It really use a change of scenery. Yeah. Everybody smoking all the greenery. Yeah. Close the match cause they were handed down to me. But I'm still fly, I'm still fly, I know. I'm still fly, I'm still fly, let's go. It could all be worse, I could be a hater like you. It could all be worse. Pills to make the man, but that poison's gonna kill you. From the inside out. So right now, say it with your chest now, say it with your chest now. I'm young, I'm free, can't nobody take me here and now. It's my time to run it out. It's my time, it's my time, it's my time to ride it. I'm young, I'm free, can't nobody take me here and now. It's my time to run it out. It's my time, it's my time, it's my time to ride it out. It's your time, oh. Cheers to all the haters cause you proved to me that rising to the top was my destiny. And you can see whatever from behind me, but I'm still fly, I know. I'm still fly, let's go. It could all be worse, I could be a hater like you. It could all be worse. Clothes to make the man, but that poison's gonna kill you. From the inside out, it's time to say it with your chest now, say it with your chest now. I'm young, I'm free, can't nobody take me here and now. It's my time to run it out. It's my time, it's my time, it's my time to ride it. I'm young, I'm free, can't nobody take me.
Welcome to the after party. I didn't really tell you a whole lot about what we do here on Like It or Not, the Benjamin Dixon Show, but we have an amazing community. Our producer just dropped a link in our chat here. You have to copy it and open it in another tab, but it'll take you to the chat room where everyone is chatting and hanging out. We usually have somewhere around 1,000 people watching us every morning between all of the live streams. And then obviously we put out a podcast afterwards, and it gets all the downloads that it gets. But we have a great community of people who have been listening to you this morning and giving a lot of feedback. One of the listeners said this morning that they heard you mention that you're an engineer. We're talking about the need for STEM to be brought, not only brought into schools, but particularly targeting Black people, Black